Hey guys, it's Mr. Kies. How's it going? Today we're going to have a 7th grade video. So you guys have been reading the last short stories in the Martian Chronicles, so we're going to talk about them. There Will Come Soft Rains and MillionYear Picnic. So let's do a recap and let's see where we are now. So first off, let's talk about what has happened in There Will Come Soft Rains. It's set in the city of Allendale, California, which there's a couple different Allendales throughout California, but this seems to be kind of like a fictionalized one. And the entire story is taking place in a house. And this house is seemingly abandoned. But what's weird about this house is it seems to be automated as well. There's a speaking box thing that like tells the time, and the kitchen is cooking food all on its own, and it's cleaning all on its own, and it's washing dishes, and it's doing all these things automated all on its own. But there doesn't seem to be any occupants in the house. No one is eating the food that's being made. No one's listening to the alarms or anything like that. At one point we see the outside of the house, and we are told about this burned, charred side of the house that has these 5 white spots on it. A father mowing the lawn, a mother picking up flowers and doing something with plants, and then 2 children throwing a ball. And so we're kind of given this image of this man, this woman, these 2 children, and this ball burned on the side of the house, which is pretty crazy. At one point we have a dog that comes up to the house, and the dog seems to respond to the dog panting and lets the dog in the house, and the dog runs around trying to find something to eat, and it can't get into the kitchen even though the kitchen is making food, and apparently the dog dies, and the house cleans up after the dog apparently. Even more things start happening in the house. There's a kid's playroom that turns on its own as if kids are in there playing. A drink is poured for someone in a parlor, and a poem is read for no one there. As the story continues, eventually a tree branch breaks a window in the house, and it starts a fire. It knocks over like some cleaning solvent that's in the house, and it starts a fire, and the house tries to extinguish the fire and take care of it, but there's no more water left. And so basically the house just burns down. And that's the end of the story. Okay, so let's do a little bit of analysis on what we see going on here. Now clearly the story is taking place after the atomic war has hit the United States, the atomic war that we saw in the off-season, and we've seen throughout the most recent stories that we've read in the Martian Chronicles. And this house is clearly existing in the United States, so we're seeing kind of a post-war view of what the world looks like. And in fact, we get to see how truly destructive that atomic war was, because we see those burned images on the side. Clearly, those white spots are where people were standing and doing like everyday things when the atomic bomb hit. It was so fast and so destructive that something like a ball thrown in midair, it just disintegrates. It's gone. It's just vapor instantly. This was a common thing that we saw in literature at the time after the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. A lot of fear of atomic war. And this is also around the time when the Cold War is really starting to ramp up. So you're starting to see a lot of writers and a lot of creators express a fear of what could happen if an atomic war were to start. And this is really the first time in the novel that we're getting that perspective. We're seeing exactly what those fears could look like. We also get an interesting view of this particular house. What's crazy about the story is the main character is the house. There's no other characters really within the story, except for maybe the dog. And you get to see kind of this future viewpoint of what a house would look like, which honestly isn't too far away from what we can expect to see nowadays. You see vacuums that are cleaning things up automatically, which should sound pretty familiar to you guys. You have this house that's operating on a timer and has someone talking to the occupants even if no one's there, and telling stories and reading poems. That should also sound pretty familiar to you guys. Speaking of poems, the poem that they have in this particular short story is by Sarah Teasdale. And it is called There Will Come Soft Rains, which is where the title of the story comes from. And what's interesting about this particular poem is that it actually has a similar sort of layout from what you could see in this one. So if we take a look at the poem, we can kind of see what's being expressed there and then compare that to the rest of the story. So if you look, page 225, there will come soft rains and the smell of the ground, and swallows circling with their shimmering sound, and frogs in the pond singing at night, and wild plum trees in tremulous white. Robins will wear their feathery fire, whistling their whims on a low fence wire, and no one will know of the war, not one, will care at last when it is done. No one would mind, neither bird nor tree, if mankind perished utterly, and spring herself when she woke at dawn would scarcely know that we were gone. So this particular poem was written after World War I, or at least a World War I era type time period. And the poem is basically kind of expressing how, you know, here's nature and all these beautiful things, and here are these beautiful elements of nature, and we have all destroyed ourselves in the war, and nature just carries on, just continues on. There's not a care in the world as far as nature is concerned, because it's nature, it does what it does. But we as humans have destroyed ourselves. The weird thing is There Will Come Soft Rains, the short story, tells that same sort of thing, but the difference is nature has also been decimated. They talk about the barren wasteland and this glowing city in the background of Allendale, and in the process of destroying ourselves in the Martian Chronicles, we also in turn destroyed nature. But that doesn't mean that nature doesn't get its last sort of hurrah, because what ultimately starts the fire in the house, what destroys this last vestige of humanity, this one thing that is still remaining? A tree branch. A tree branch blowing in the wind that knocks through the window. So in a way, nature kind of got its, you know, its bam, so to speak, like its comeback. What's also interesting is there's a bit of irony in the fact that this house is able to save itself. It can extinguish this fire. It can get rid of the thing that's killing it. But it used up all of its water sources whenever it was watering plants or whenever it was taking care of the dishes, cleaning dishes and filling up bathtubs for people that weren't there. So all that water that could have been saved to save the house ended up getting used up whenever nobody was actually using the things that it used. So even at the end of the day, nature still got its due. But at the same time, we got to really see the viewpoint and the fears that a lot of people had at this time around atomic war. And this is pre-nuclear war. So the concept of the nuclear bomb was still a foreign concept to the public. And it wasn't anything that we could even see at that time, but they were very aware of what the power of the atom bomb could do. And this short story really shows a lot of those concerns. This is one of my favorite short stories. It's part of the reason why we have the Martian Chronicles as one of our works, for that sole purpose. I mean, there's so much going on in this particular story, with the poem connection, with the irony of nature coming back, the future that Bradbury was able to predict with a lot of the things that we see in the story, and just that charred image on the side of this family who was living a normal day and having just a normal time, doing chores and playing with a ball, and it was over in an instant, that quick and that fast. It's just a really haunting sort of thing. So whenever you, if you're going back through and reading the story, really take a look at that particular section, and take a look at that particular part of the story, because it's Bradbury at its finest, with the imagery, with evoking a certain sort of emotion, and really giving a unique perspective. This story is obviously gained even greater infamy. One of my favorite things is obviously I'm a video game guy, and one of my favorite video games is Fallout 3, which also takes place in the United States after nuclear war. And one of the houses that you can go into in Fallout 3 has a Mr. Handy that's owned by a Mr. McClellan, which is the family in There Will Come Soft Rains. And if you follow the Mr. Handy around a little bit, it actually will start saying the Sarah Teasdale poem, There Will Come Soft Rains.
There will come soft rains and the smell of the ground, and swallows circling with their shimmering sound, and frogs in the pool singing at night, and wild plum trees in tremulous white.
So it's kind of an allusion there to all of that. That gets us to our final story, The MillionYear Picnic, which is actually the last story in the collection as well. And Sure enough, we're back on Mars. So here we have a family, and this family composes of a mother, a father, and 3 young boys, Timothy, Robert, and Michael. They are going on a fishing trip, which is exciting. And of course, this fishing trip is unique because they are on Mars. Now, this is taking place after Mars has been abandoned. At this point, we don't even think that there's anybody else on Mars. Sure, Walter Grip and maybe even Genevieve might still be there from the Silent Towns, but we don't really see them. We're not quite sure. As far as we're concerned, there's no one else on Mars other than seemingly this family. And this family, the father is acting very strange. He's constantly looking up at the skies. He's nervous about things. He's as if he's trying to hide, and the boys are just trying to have a good time. They're just trying to enjoy their family time together and things like that. And one of the things that they constantly want to see is a Martian. They want nothing more than to see a Martian, and the father tells them, don't worry, we'll see some Martians, and it's going to happen. Which is strange because we know that all the Martians, for the most part, are gone. We maybe saw some for the off-season. Of course, we saw a Martian in The Martian. But we really haven't seen many Martians up to this point since they were decimated. We're not sure where these Martians are going to come from, but the father assures his kids they are there. At one point, as they're going on their fishing trip, they hear explosions. Apparently, the father has blown up the rocket that they came on. There is no leaving Mars anymore. There's no way for them to get back to Earth. And the father expresses that that's a good thing. Earth is just this war-torn place. There's no reason to go there. There's no reason to go back. They had planned this ever since before their kids were born, when the Earth was starting to become this war-torn area. They had planned on going to Mars and never going back. At one point, they get to go to a city, and the father says, pick a city, it's yours. This is your place. Basically, stake your claim. This is your area. This is where you get to live and be. And it's yours now. You know, it's very much the Mufasa, everything the light touches is your kingdom. Everything in the city is yours. Have at it. The kids are thrilled. The oldest son, though, is a little bit curious and a little bit concerned. I'm not sure. It turns out there's actually one more rocket coming. It's a friend of the father's, and he's coming with his 4 daughters. A family of 3 sons, and then a family of 4 daughters. Pretty interesting here. That's when we start to kind of realize more about what the plan is. The plan apparently is to live on Mars and repopulate it. It's at that point that the father then takes all of like the documents and all the things that they had on Earth, basically everything that made them like members of Earth, burned them all, just destroyed them all. And at the end of the story, the father says, okay, I'm going to show you some Martians. And they go and they look over and they look at their reflections in the canal, in the water, and they say, here are your Martians. And it's the children looking back at themselves and seeing their own reflection, and then the story ends with them saying that the Martians stared at themselves for a while. The obvious connection there being, you are now Martians. So what is the story really saying? Well, it's kind of got a lot of things going on with it. It's interesting the fact that this is a family of 4 boys, and then a family of 3 boys, and then a family of 4 girls is coming. So it's clear that as they get older and as they spend more time with one another, there's going to be some repopulating of the human race, so to speak, or the Martian race, because the way that the story ends is it makes it clear that, you know, Earth is gone. There is no more Earth, not the way that we've seen it. But we do have individuals who are living on Mars who are about to basically repopulate Mars. They are Martians, as far as they're concerned. And it's this really strange concept, this idea of basically saying, like, here's this area that's been abandoned and empty and destroyed, and here's this other planet that we have that's also been destroyed. And we're going to be the ones that bring everything back, but not as, you know, this isn't New Earth. This is still Mars, and we are now Martians. So those that had asked, you know, hey, are we going to see any more Martians throughout the story? That's all we have at this point, right, is Martians. And it actually is interesting because it brings us back to Night Meeting a little bit, where Tomas was talking with the other Martian and saying, like, are you from the past, are you from the future, or am I from the past, what's going on here? It's clear that based on the Martian Chronicles and the story that we just had, the future of the Martian race is in fact human. It's interesting that they went with this, and it has kind of a, I would say that this particular story has a very inspirational ending, a very motivational ending. It has this idea of new beginnings, that even with things like warfare and destruction and battle, and like what we saw in There Will Come Soft Rains, complete devastation of the world, the human race will still persevere, push on, and move on, even if it's under a different name. They will still continue to do what they can to survive. And here are two families basically taking it upon themselves and saying, the life that we knew on Earth is over, the life that we now have on Mars is where we are now, and let's continue and do the best that we can. So that concludes the Martian Chronicles. We've got quite a cycle going on here with all the things that were happening at the beginning of the story, of all the expeditions and all the journeys and all the just interactions with Martians. And then we get into like the colonization period, where we start to see all these unique individuals, like Driscoll in his forest, Stendhal in his house with pikes, even the plight of the black African Americans in the South as they were trying to escape way in the middle of the air. Just these really unique stories that you see throughout. And then you get to that massive destruction of Earth, and we get to see kind of what humanity does once it's been faced with such a massive trauma. So Grip and Genevieve, it's trying to find love and companionship as best they can, and then when Grip realizes, if I have to spend the rest of my life with the last woman on Mars, and it's this woman, maybe it's not all that it's cracked up to be, which is pretty funny. You get to see the way that Hathaway progressed after the death of his family and what he did to cope. And then we get to see how Earth has done since that time, and how these houses are operating themselves. And then we got this final like redemptive sort of element of humanity and life will continue to persevere despite all the things that we've done to it. It's really an interesting sort of thing, considering all of this is supposed to be very science fiction, but once again we bring it back to that human element that Bradbury was so concerned with. So that concludes the Martian Chronicles. I hope you guys enjoyed reading all the short stories. Even if you didn't enjoy all of them, even if you didn't enjoy the book as a whole, I hope that you guys can at least point out a couple short stories that you really enjoyed, and really will continue to like, and at least something that you can say, you know, that short story was fun, or I really liked that part, or I really liked that character, because that's ultimately the goal. You guys have a discussion question, and we're going to do 2 discussion questions for these particular shorts. So now that you guys have seen Bradbury's picture of Earth after it's been destroyed by atomic war, and known that we have explosives that are 1,000 times more powerful and dangerous than any of the bombs that he had ever seen in his timeline, do you think that we on Earth should have nuclear weapons? Think about it. So many different countries throughout the world have access to those, and countries that are volatile and have volatile leadership. So do you think that we should even have nuclear weapons to begin with? Your second discussion question is, let's say you're in the position that one of the sons or one of the daughters is in the MillionYear Picnic. You're basically going to be living on Mars now, going forward. What's one of the first things that you do, knowing that this is where you're going to live forever, and this is where you're basically here to live and bring humanity back? What do you do to prepare for that? What do you do to make that sort of thing happen? Because it's entirely possible that these kids are the same age that you guys are. So what's the first thing that you guys do when you're on Mars, now that you've learned that you guys are like the last bits of humanity? What do you guys do? Anyways, that's all I have for this particular video, guys. Thanks so much for checking it out, and hopefully this provided you guys with a little bit more clarity and information on the last short stories. That concludes Martian Chronicles. We're going to start on the importance of being earnest probably next week, and I know a lot of you guys ordered it and had them at the school and purchased them that way. Those are still at the school. I'm sure we can set up a way for you guys to pick them up if you'd like. They're still going to be there. But what I'm going to go ahead and do is actually send you guys a PDF of the play to your tablets, completely free. So you guys will have access to everything on your tablet. You won't have to worry about having the actual play in front of you, and that way everything can be taken good to go there. Anyways, have a great rest of your day, guys. I'll probably have another video up later this week covering some of the other materials that we're going to be going over this week. So, until then, have a great rest of your day. Stay safe, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you guys later this week. Bye.